Hey guys, this is Dustin Schmidt, also known as Leatherass. Today's video is going to be a continuation on part one, the video that was released prior to this one. We're just going to pick up where we left off, and like I said, throughout the video there are some boring parts of the video in terms of the action at the tables and all that stuff. So I'm going to fast forward it so I don't bore you guys to death. But we'll start off here on the top left here where I flat king queen against someone who three bets a lot. I don't know what it is, but I fold a little more than most, so maybe people three bet me a little more than most. I think he probably has like a 15% range here. And his range on the flop, I would guess, is the same as his pre-flop, like his betting range is the same. Just because it's that type of board where he should just pretty much c-bet everything he has, and lots of hands have gut shots. If he three-bets like a 10-8 suited or a 7-8 suited or a jack-10 or something like that. I decided on this flop to go ahead and make a small raise after flopping, well, a really, really strong hand. In fact, let me get back to you guys on that real quick. We'll plug that in Flopzilla. Okay, so we can see here at this flop, I don't know exactly what type of hands he three bets with. Some people are starting, I've noticed, to three bet deuces through eights, but I think that's generally against somebody that has a wide four betting range, because those are hands maybe you could shove over a three bet. I don't know if he's three betting with those hands or not, to be honest. And this range, I'm kind of guessing here a little bit. He might not have some of these types of hands. Like he might flat some of these right here. And then, and a lot of these like suited broadways, like maybe he doesn't want to, he wants to make sure he sees a flop with those types of hands, in which case he might have more of these types of hands in here. 9-8 suited might just flat as well, but maybe like a king 9 or king 8 suited, maybe like a king 10, jack 10. Maybe we'll ditch a couple of these hands, jack 7 suited. Yeah, I think this is probably, it's got to be in the ballpark. It's like basically either we can eliminate some of these hands in here and then add in the pairs, or we could leave off the pairs and add in more of these. And I kind of think the majority of people that are three betting this at this frequency, 14, 15%, tend to be more likely to have these types of hands, these king 9s, queen 9s, stuff like that, rather than the pairs here. So anyway, we'll go off this assumption, but as you can see here, he doesn't have us beat very often at all. He has an overpair. How does he have an overpair? 3.68. I don't get that. I guess that must. Oh, I know. I have the dead cards in here. I guess that changes a little bit. Let's actually factor those in. I forgot to do that. So those cards are dead. So he has an overpair 4% of the time. Actually, that does sound right. I was thinking something else. So around 7.5% were up against the set 2 pair overpair, and then the top pairs, considering there are plenty of king jacks, king queens, king 10s, we have like a king 9 suited in here. I think that, just kind of a rough estimate, we might be ahead or chopping with like 12% of these 17% here top pairs, because the ace kings are ahead of us, but the other one's behind. So we do have the best hand probably about, a little over 80% of the time on the flop. There are certainly a lot of options here. And I think check calling is totally, or excuse me, calling the flop bet is completely fine. Let me take a look at his sizing real quick. I don't remember it being particularly large. So 18 into 32 here. Not big. It doesn't really look like he's going for value a whole lot. Looks like it's either kind of a cheaper bluff, maybe with some hand like, you know, ace jack off, or possibly like a tens through queens that, you know, just wants to take a little stab and go from there. It could be part of his normal sizing, but I'm not entirely sure. But I kind of feel like from my experience with him, he usually goes a little bigger here. So, like I said, we have the best hand, you know, probably 82% of the time or so. And more importantly, unless if the board breaks out, we're going broke here. I mean, we're never folding king queen if he triple barrels. You know, especially if it's something like, you know, an 8 of hearts on the turn and then like a deuce of diamonds or something that gave him a lot of draws, or a pair, or, you know, a pair and a gut shot, or whatever. So my options are just to flat, which I think might be my standard. Well, I don't really know if I have a standard here, but that might be something I do a little more often than raising. But I also think raising is an option simply because these are also really good boards, because he only has top pair or better 24% of the time. And there's no real flush draws that he can like re-jam if you like bluff raised here. I think this is just a great board against a range like this to go ahead and make a flop raise. And I wouldn't mind showing up from time to time with a hand like king queen, and, you know, maybe having them call this flop raise with king 10, king jack, and then just calling down, putting me on some kind of 7-8 or queen jack or jack 10 or just total bluff, and let him know that I can have some thin value here as well, as part of my raising range, which I think will deter him a little bit from fighting back if I'm making flop raises like this, which I want to be doing, because the flop's 50 and I can make it like 44 and get ace jack to fold, or ace 10 to fold, or ace 5 suited, or, I mean, very easily get those hands to fold. They'll fold without even thinking usually. You know, you get a guy that'll occasionally fight back and like click it back, or like call the flop and then lead the turn, or just call the flop and if it goes check check on the turn, like make a large bet on the river. You get guys that'll do that, and, you know, with the right read that can be good, but it's just going to be a lot more difficult for him to play back at me if I also have these types of hands. If I'm not just like basically sets and slow played ace king and aces and incorporating a little bit of this, it just gives him a little more incentive to go ahead and fold, when most of the time I'm going to want him to fold here in this spot. This is certainly not a mandatory bluff raise by any means, but it's a board where, especially if somebody's been 3-betting me a lot, I mean, this could be an auto raise for me in some spots with basically anything with any equity, which almost everything I could have here has some equity. You know, maybe not so much like a pocket sevens, but, you know, I will have, it'd just be a good spot to take a jack 10 and raise, or queen jack and raise, and, I mean, anything and raise really with the right, you know, if you think your opponent's going to play pretty fit or fold. If I remember correctly, I think I did go for the small size on the raise here. Well, I guess I already showed it, but I wasn't paying attention. I think I'd probably go for something like a... Oh, wow. What am I doing? I totally blew this hand. I totally forgot what I did on this hand. I did just call the flop. But I actually wish I had raised a little bit. I don't know why I had it in my head that I raised this flop, but I must be remembering a different hand. I recorded this recently too. I guess I'm losing my mind. But I thought I raised this flop, in which case I would have been, I wish I had, I think it would have been a little bit better play than calling here. But it's fine. It's obviously perfectly fine. But against the guys that like to 3-bet a lot, I do think raising is going to be a little better because you could get mega paid for one, and you can mess with their wide range second. So here's kind of an interesting spot here with the jacks. I make a really big fold. This I do remember. I'm not losing my mind. I'm sure I fold this one. And the situation is this. I mean, his calling range that likes this flop is basically like deuces, fives, nines will for sure just call pre-flop. I mean, not for sure with nines, but pretty for sure. And then you got to look at like the suited aces, which would definitely get in there with a weaker player for sure, knowing that they're going to come along almost always. So basically, his range here, in my opinion, especially since I have the jack of diamonds, it rules out some of the combos that I would like to get it in against. Like, for example, jack 10 of diamonds, if I had, you know, like a black and a red jack or something. Well, I guess and the way these combos are, so a spade and a heart would be a better way to say it. I might be slightly more inclined to get it in, but might still not be good. So I think we're probably looking at maybe an ace-queen of diamonds, an ace-10 of diamonds for sure. Ace-queen of diamonds might 3-bet pre, but it can also call. I usually actually call there with the weaker player. And I don't think he's slow playing queens plus very often, simply because yes, he chases out the fish, but I can 4-bet bluff him, and my range is going to be pretty wide from the cutoff here, isolating a fish, so I could 4-bet bluff him and he can get it in and win a pretty decent pot. Or I could just decide to go broke fairly light with like an ace-queen, or, you know, I mean, maybe if he's 3-betting me a lot, I get frisky and just like jam an ace-x suited or what have you. But I don't think he's slow playing that too much. So we'll say, you know, maybe half of his ace-queen of diamonds, and then all the other aces all have, except for ace-10 of diamonds. Well, I guess even ace-10 of diamonds has a backdoor straight. But a lot of them have like 2 backdoors, like ace-8 of diamonds, ace-7 of diamonds has, you know, 2 ways to back into a straight, plus a flush draw, plus an over. Not in very good shape against that hand. I would get it in with that hand because, you know, the odds and the pot size and everything would certainly justify it, but it's really not all that great. And then when you factor in him having fives, deuces, and nines some percentage of the time, where I'm just in terrible shape, I really think that I really think folding is best here, even with 160 in the middle here. I don't know. I don't really think there's that much of a check raise bluffing range, given I made a fairly decent sized bet, and he made kind of a small-ish raise. I don't think he's going to think that he can actually get me off of a hand like this. And plus, when I bet there into 2 people, like, I just have a pretty good hand pretty often. And so, obviously, he should bluff raise the shit out of me with essentially any 2 napkins if he knows I'm going to fold this hand, because I'm just, you know, basically the only thing I'm getting in with then is when I flop a set, or, like, I would get it in with aces here, simply because, and kings, because I can get it in against, like, queen jack of diamonds or something like that where I'm a lot more happy about it. But with just jacks, you know, if he has king queen of diamonds, I mean, he's 2 overs and a flush draw and I guess an unlikely backdoor straight. And my equity's not all that great. I mean, I suppose you could run the math and maybe somebody could show me I'm like wrong by like a really small margin here. But I doubt it. I feel like if we ran all the variations here and assigned him a really low bluffing range, like a really low, like if I jammed here and he would fold very, very small percentage of the time, in my opinion. He does not have a high check raise percentage. You know, maybe if he was check raising like 22% or some really high number, then I would assign more like, you know, 6, 7 of hearts type hands, 7, 8 of hearts, stuff like that that might make a check raise and then like bluff diamonds or something on the turn. But I think that's a really small part of his range, if any, for this particular opponent with a lower check raising range than a really aggressive opponent might be. And so I just feel like I'm pretty much like flipping at best and like maybe occasionally like 10% of the time shoving and getting him to fold, and then, you know, maybe like, and then just being totally screwed against like a set quite a lot. And he could even theoretically have something like 9-5 of clubs or something because it was a limper and a raise, and he just decides he wants to get in there and try and flop a hand. So small consideration, but that could be in his range. And it felt really dirty. I mean, I'm sitting here getting over 3-1. You know, I only got to call 50 into 166, but how am I going to play the turn? I mean, there's just so few turn cards that, you know, if he does have a set, then, you know, he's going to barrel, and then I pretty much have to pay off like on 2 safe cards. And I just don't think calling is that much of an option. It kind of is a raise, get it in situation. With aces, it would be a lot more of a good spot, I think, to call and just basically call down unless diamonds come. But jacks is just, gosh, I mean, you know, even if a queen, offsuit queen comes, you know, and he bets again, like, you know, he could have queen 10 of diamonds, he could have king queen of diamonds, he could have ace queen of diamonds. There's just not very few cards. There's no cards other than a jack where I can proceed confidently, and there's a lot of cards that I could like call down on against his range. A lot of board runouts, I should say, where I could call down against his range profitably, but you know, I think that's a spot where it's perfectly fine to just live and fight another day. As you can see on the bottom left, I clearly should have called that 8-6 offsuit. I don't know what I was thinking. Missed out on my trips. Kind of joking, by the way. Actually, it probably wouldn't be that bad, but whatever. I was actually joking. It's not my normal to call there. If the guy had a bigger stack and he was more of a fish, this guy's like, I can't make it out what the hell his deal is. His number is 23-17, looked like a pretty good player, but I remember eventually getting his money and him going broke in a really dumb spot, and like that and he doesn't have a full stack. I didn't know what to make of that guy just yet. So I think, let me see. I think we're approaching the boring part, so I might be pausing real quick and fast forwarding to a different spot in the video. Ace-10 here, he just kind of makes a little chicken shit bet, half the pot. It just doesn't look like somebody who wants to get the money in. And, again, very exploitable in the sense that you could just start betting half pot against me and watch me check raise you all day long and then click it back a lot, or, call the flop and see if I bet the turn and then raise, or if I check the turn, just bet. Very, very, very exploitable because I don't have hands that want to put a lot of money in there, like almost ever. But at the same time, you just can't sit there playing poker worried about being exploited, because the reality is that most people just look at their Jack-10 there and fold and shoot. Even I do it most of the time too, simply because people aren't check raising so much that I need to do that much about it. Here with the sixes, I just we'll just kind of rewind. I mean, he just makes this little bet, and I can represent big, and he can't, and I don't know. Maybe it's a leak of mine, who knows, but I look at this, and I'm pretty much always crafting some kind of plan to win the pot, even though it's a zero equity bluff. If you notice, I just kind of basically min raised him back, and I don't know what I make of that too much. I think what I was going for at the time was just basically the idea of, well, I don't think he'll fold now, but I'll get him to fold the turn. And I don't mind him putting another $5 in before he folds. But then again, the board is, because there is a flush draw, maybe I should be a little more, I should just make like a normal size and then just keep coming after him, rather than giving him such a good price to draw to like a gut shot with Queen-10 or some, even if it's just like a King-7, like making his 7 or whatever. I might prefer that a little bit on a drier board. But anyway, that's what I did, and I think it's also fine. I think we're talking about, we're splitting hairs here in terms of did I make the most profitable play I could have made. I know I made a profitable play, but was it the most profitable? So queens here, 3-bet, no brainer. Bet the flop, no brainer. Turn's kind of weird a little bit, but at the same time, and I'm pretty sure he has a pocket pair close to 100%, and I don't think he has a king in his hand almost ever, because I think he 4-bets ace-king, and I think that he doesn't check call the flop with king-queen, plus I have 2 queens, so unless he's slow playing a set, I think I'm fine. And I think it actually might not be the worst spot in the world for him to make a check raise on the turn, like almost even like a min check raise or slightly more than min, just because I'm betting that turn always, and maybe I fold jacks or queens sometimes that I bet again, or maybe I'll even fold aces because he just looks so much like a set. Like, what else could he have? Maybe I'll pretty much fold everything in my range there without a read. So maybe in a vacuum, some kind of small check raise there might not be such a horrible option for him. Although, that being said, I wouldn't make that play against him. If I wouldn't turn fives into a bluff against him because when he has jacks or queens, he's just probably going to call down because I don't know. I just feel like people don't fold anymore. I'm saying all these things like, oh, I would fold here, I would fold here, I would do this, and every time I mention that, it's like the most exploitable thing ever. Like, why would, you know, if I was folding really as much as I was saying, then people should just raise me constantly. But the thing is it's not like I'm not adjusting. I mean, if he's taking that line a lot, I'm watching him take that line against others. It's not like I'm just going to be like, oh, okay, I'm folding my aces here, I mean, or even my queens. Like, I'm just, that's the thing about poker is I say these things kind of in a vacuum a little bit, whereas oftentimes, well, never against a regular is a play, entirely 100% in a vacuum. Oh, here's one of my favorite hands on the top middle here. You guys will get a kick out of this one. I'm just going to shut up and let it play out. So yes, that is a $4 lead. And no, I did not mean to do that. Although, if he raised there, that might have been an interesting shove spot. And I was thinking that the minute I made the bet. Yeah, so my daughter spilled, um, she, she spilled some of her grape juice on my computer. And I didn't realize this until I accidentally made this $4 bet, but I think it was like the five, like I was going to make it like 58 or something. Like there's something about when I click that number, it like freaks out and like it like erases what I was going to bet, or it like makes like 3 fives just pop up like right away. So I obviously had to not use the 5 button anymore. um, Yeah, I meant to bet 4, and then I started thinking, well, what if he raises? Do I shove? But mostly I was just thinking, fuck me, he's going to call with like, 10-9 and not even think about it. And I probably could have got that hand to fold. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking he had something like 5-6, or shoot, maybe even like, probably not ace-3. Ace-high might just say, here's my $4. I know I'm beat, but I'm going to call anyway. But this is that is a bet size I might take with something like 10-9 once in a while, and then maybe even call a reshift sometimes if he raises. And we might have had a history on that at some point, so maybe he maybe even just folded like an ace-3 or ace-5, I don't know, or like I mean, it's just a small blind, big blind, so I guess he could have something like ace-deuce of clubs that made it there on the turn, or whatever. So anyway, that worked. I just thought it'd be funny. I'll go ahead and roll it again. my daughter and her exploits, when sometimes she, comes near me when I'm playing poker, or comes down to say hi or whatever it is, have actually been enormously profitable for me. She has caused me to misclick or have something like her grape juice making me bet $4 or something like that. That I swear to God, it works every single time. It just does. I mean, one time I misclicked min 4-bet somebody with 4-10 off, and they decided to trap with aces, and the flop was 4-4-10, and he just happily went broke. And it was at 5-10 for $1,000 or something like that. So just socked that away for her college tuition fund for helping me win a pot I had no business winning. The queens here, I mean, my standard certainly to 3-bet, but with a guy with $50 that seems to play every pot and raises a lot, and will just shove so light, and I could see 3x crazy, reshoving jack, ace jack or something like that, putting me on a big hand almost never. I just felt way more good could come from that. And so here's a play right here with the ace-king suited that I think is a mistake, and I'll tell you why. In fact, I'm almost positive it is a mistake. There's no question about it. This guy does do some cold 4-betting, and I just didn't think it through all the way. I should have just folded pre-flop, even though I got away with it here. But the thing is, when this guy makes it 8, and I make it, whatever I made it, 26, that is just not a spot, because this guy is just going to stick his money in with all kinds of hands, this Geordie Porty, and I'm pretty sure A-Town knows that. This is just a spot where it's just for value. I mean, he might have some just absurdly small 4-bet bluff percentage here. But, I mean, I look like I'm pretty happy to get a bunch of money in, making it 26. I'm not just making a small raise back. Plus, I've got to think I don't have very much fold equity, so he knows I have a good hand, and then he knows this guy, Geordie Porty, can stick it in, and I just don't really see him messing around here too much. And so I really, really do think his range is only, ace-king might be the worst hand he does this with. In fact, I'm almost certain that this is the worst hand he'll do it with. I think the rest is just basically, I mean, because of our stack sizes too, being 160 something, I don't even know if queens is in there. He might just call with queens, or, I mean, probably not find a fold, even though it might not be the worst idea for him. But he might just call, and then God, calling sucks for him too, because then if Geordie Porty jams and then I jam, and what's he supposed to do with queens there in that spot? Basically, pray I have ace-king and call, which I think has got to be a bad idea for him. So he just doesn't really have anything to do with, he should just have kings and aces and ace-king pretty much. And this is just a really bad mistake, and I got away with it. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video real quick and make sure for this two-part series I've got, let's see, we're 54 minutes into the footage. I recorded about an hour and a half. So we got 35 minutes worth of footage and only about 25 minutes worth of time left in the video, plus I'll be pausing a little bit. So we need to make sure that we get some interesting stuff here. So I'm going to pause it just for a second, look for some better spots. Quick spot. I'm going to talk about this hand. Just came up right after the pause. Deuces here, I check back this flop, 10-7-8 against the big blind. and then he goes ahead and leads the turn. I should have raised here. Although it's really, really difficult for me to represent a 9. I think people just don't take king, queen there and re-raise back anywhere near often enough to basically make my play unprofitable against a non like set or 9 hand. So yeah, I think I had I just think it's a spot where when he knows I can't have a 9, he leads 100% of his range if he's thinking at all. And which I say that, but I've probably missed plenty of those spots, like on 12 tables. But with time to think about it, he should always lead there, and which means I should always raise there, because basically he just doesn't have a 9 or a set often enough. And while I have a hard time representing a 9, I can have a 9 now. I can have pocket 9s or 10-9 and play it that way, but I just don't think he doesn't have it often enough, which means I should raise always if he never fights back, and I don't think he fights back nearly enough for it to be unprofitable by any means. So anyway, just a quick thought. Kind of an interesting spot here, not too super interesting, but Pikachu power bet into I think CONS 505 here, and then me as well here, and I had ace-6 of diamonds. I think he is c-betting often enough with air to make a call profitable, but it might not be as profitable as some people think. People generally toss the chips in with ace-6 here and never ever consider folding, and if you broke it down, it might not be as good to call here as one might think. Depends a lot on their c-betting proclivities, and one stat that's difficult to come by is how often they're c-betting into 2 people, in terms of having a big enough sample size to really understand that, and also like knowing which board textures they're betting into 2 people and which ones are not. Like for me, take me for example, I'll c-bet into this board with like a queen jack or something, like I think some of the time, but a lot of times it depends on who's in the pot and you know, whether I think they'll float me very often or call with a hand like jacks, which would probably just cause me to shut down with a hand like king 10. If there's fish in the pot who love to play aces, then maybe I won't bet as much. And just in general, I mean, it can't really be all that great of an idea to bet into 2 people as a bluff with no equity. Now, that being said, if you want to close your eyes and 3-barrel here, I think that that's a perfectly reasonable line to take as well. I mean, if you're sitting there at queen jack and you go, you know what, unless somebody has ace-5, ace-3, pocket 5s, pocket 3s, or hits their kicker with an ace that calls the flop, like, I'm in great shape, and obviously those hands are going to be really hard to come by. So that's totally fine. I would never say that that's a bad idea, but I think the more interesting spot, and these situations play out quite a bit, is that, you know, the turn gets checked by the pre-flop raiser, and it kind of puts you in a position of like, what the hell do I do here? Because, you know, if you bet half pot, your hand is face up. I mean, if you bet something like just a half pot to kind of protect your hand a little bit, or protect, you know, him betting, protect yourself from having to face a large river bet if he leads into you, you know, you can get check raised a lot. I mean, I know I've done that myself and seen people do it plenty, where, you know, they'll just take like queen 10 here on the turn and see if their opponent checks, and if their opponent checks, then they'll just make like a big bet on the river and try and get him off of a hand like mine, or sometimes they'll if their opponent bets, then they go for a check raise, figuring it'll work plenty often enough, even if you just had 2 old maid cards. And given you have a gut shot or something like that, or maybe they have like 7, 8 of clubs or something like that that picks up even more equity than just a gut shot, then check raising these spots can be really good. So I'm kind of in a situation where it's like no matter what I do, I feel like it's, even though he's out of position, he's like kind of in control. I mean, I guess I could just bet like 3/4 and give him like a size that maybe he doesn't want to mess with as much. But it's almost kind of like a pure bluff because I just can't get called by worse, really. So, I mean, if you think about it, there's really nothing all that exciting that can happen. Unless you have a really good read on their range and you know that they're likely to do what we just feared that they would do, in which case if they're really doing it that often, then it just becomes a trivial check back on the turn and call the river, or bet the turn and call a check raise and call down, or maybe call down like a non 10 or higher and non-club river if they bet, because that might be the types of hands they would check raise with, or gut shots and flush draws. Anyway, really weird spot, and I don't really like any action that you can take, which is also, let me point this out, which is also why which is also what makes flatting here not anywhere near as attractive as an option. And I think if you ask 100 pros, I think at least 99 of them would say, of course you call here on the flop, and you don't even think twice about it. But, I kind of tend to go against the grain sometimes, as some of you know, and I try and approach things differently sometimes than some other people. And I might be the 1 pro out of 100 that says, just fold right away on the flop, because if your opponent is basically betting all better aces and then maybe not all of his air hands, maybe only sometimes with his air hands, then right there you're not in great shape. And then when you factor in this like just awful spot you're in on the turn, this kind of no-win situation you're in on the turn, and you created a little bit bigger pot to then put yourself in not so great of a spot on the turn, like no matter what comes unless it's a 6. I'm just not so sure that calling the flop is very good, even though it just seems absolutely absurd to say this. The more that I think about it, I'm just kind of becoming more and more convinced that I should just fold this flop. And again, another sort of exploitable thing. It's like, well, you should always bet into me, because unless I have like a big ace, like you can just bluff the shit out of me. But like I said, just because something's exploitable doesn't always mean someone is. And I think if you really go through the thought process here, I would love to like have like not a like debate, like you're right, I'm wrong debate, but like a let's put our heads together debate with somebody like Phil Galfond or something like that, somebody who is just really really in tune with all this stuff. I guess there are other options. If we're really thinking outside of the box and thinking about every scenario possible, like maybe we can like just outright pot the turn, or maybe even slightly over pot the turn and just completely turn our hand into a bluff, but get his range, like get all the hands, like discourage all the hands that he was going to pull his bullshit move with, out of there, and maybe even get some better hands to fold, like ace jack might fold on this turn if I overpotted it. Just because they're like, what the hell could this be? And he had to call us something, and now he wants to overpot it, and all of a sudden my ace 10 or ace jack doesn't look so hot anymore. So maybe you could find a profitable way to play it, but thinking within the sort of standard, within the realm of like the standard line of like either betting half pot or 2/3 on the turn, and like or checking back and all that stuff, I'm actually struggling to find a way to play it profitably. So that was a long discussion about something like this, but long story short, I painfully folded the turn there. As you can see, it actually wasn't without a whole lot of thought. It was just the minute he bet, I was paying, but then I knew I had to fold, so I folded pretty quickly, but I was sort of already mentally prepared for that kind of bet and what I would do, and I just stuck with my read. You know, it's a very reasonable way for him to play ace-jack and even ace-king potentially, or maybe even like aces potentially, or you know, because he thinks I must be floating or something, because or have like a gut shot with a low suited connector or whatever, simply because he has 3 of the 4 aces available. So I mean, anyway, I think it's actually a far more interesting spot than anybody else would sort of lead you to believe. With the 10s here, you know, I just bet the flop. This guy's such a nit. I just, you know, he just kind of has ace-jack every time when you bet, or ace-queen. Sometimes ace-king. It's just a very sort of straightforward situation in my mind. I don't think that what the play I made is weak or anything like that. But I am going to pause real quick and look for some better footage because I want to end the video on some interesting stuff. All right, so we're going to jump in here real quick just for a really brief hand here. So I bet the flop. I turn 2 pair aces up and get led into, and he bets, and then obviously he bets again, and I decide to fold. I think it's totally fine. I mean, this player is not like enormously tricky or anything like that, so you know, it definitely looks a lot like he called with like a 9-10 made a 7, or you know, I mean, I guess there's stuff like 8-7 of clubs that might play it this way, although even that hand could conceivably just check call. I don't think it would ever check raise, but I think check calling is actually what it would most likely do. So if I'm basically saying, okay, this guy's got me beat, then why the hell am I calling anyway? Well, for one, I'm getting decent pot odds. 2, I think it's a strong possibility that I win the pot. Well, certainly you know, almost a lock if I make a 7 or an ace. So there's 4 outs, and then I've got another, if he has a flush, let's say, then I've got another 7 outs. So I've got 11 cards that I might be able to win the pot on. Or I think I'll have a profitable situation at least on the river. If a queen of spades rolls off, like, and he checks and I make a large bet, I think that he might fold something like 9-10 of spades. So that's kind of the plan there, and then just maybe like well, I call, and you know, sometimes you're full of shit, or sometimes you have 8-7 and you like check the river, and you know, or maybe sometimes like he has 9-10. Well, I guess if he had 9-10, there's really no like non-spade card that could get me off of that hand. If he had like 4-5 of clubs or something like that, which he could have against just a button min raise, then and then you know, that might lead on this turn, like maybe I can, you know, get a hand like that to fold on a 9 river or something like that. I don't know, but I think for the most part I'm just beat, and it's going to be pretty close. You know, I don't like to use the phrase, well, it felt too weak to fold. There's no such thing as too strong and too weak and, you know, any of this stuff. It's just playing people's ranges. I mean, just because your hand's 2 pair or whatever doesn't mean it's worth a shit on certain types of boards. So you just want to play people's ranges and think through the hands. And in my mind, I've never I can't say never because I wasn't always at the level I'm at now, but I can't remember the last time I said, oh, folding seems weak, or, my hand's too strong to fold, or something like that. It's just basically a very simple mathematical equation, like, using assumptions, and sometimes your assumptions can be off, but the math, once you use the assumptions, is never off. And if we're to plug in what I'm pretty sure his range is on the turn, my folding my hand is just appropriate. Neither is my hand too strong to fold, or is it too weak to fold, or anything like that. It just is what it is. So here's another quick spot here with the ace-10. You may have remembered in the last video I had a pot on the bottom right screen where I had queen-jack. It might be too long ago for you guys to remember, but it's like queen-jack on a queen-jack deuce flop, and I talked about how I was torn between check-raising the flop with my top two pair or waiting for a safe turn card and then check-raising. That was a really, really wet board. Queen-jack 2 with a flush draw. If you consider what someone's calling range was a check of the check raise, you got like everything in the deck pretty much that's like an 8 or a higher, or not a queen or a jack, like scares the shit out of you, and gives you a hand that's nowhere near the nuts. But this board right here is actually a much better example. So ace-10 deuce. I was going to go for a check call. Now, none of this hand played out in any way that, I think I just bet the river and he folded after checking it twice. But I thought that my opponent could be checking back like a lot of tens and a lot of ace rags on this flop, and also might be going for like a delayed C bet with a lot of different hands, just checking back like, a 7-8 of hearts here that just has no equity when called, or very little equity, just two backdoor flushes basically, or two backdoor draws. And maybe capture a turn bet from my opponent if he doesn't bet the flop. But if he did bet the flop, my thinking was basically any card 9 or lower, where am I going with this? So any card 9 or lower, obviously my hand is super, super, super nutty. And also, if I were to check call this flop, and then something like, the 8 of hearts comes, or 9 of hearts, or 9 of diamonds, or 8 of diamonds, or whatever, that sort of gives me like double gutters with queen jacks, or what have you. I think I could get mega paid by an ace sometimes. Like I could check call the flop, let the 9 of spades roll off in the river, 9 of hearts or whatever, and then make a big check raise and maybe really get him thinking like, God, he just check called one with queen jack. He's never strong here. He might even 3-bet me with ace-10. He's might not wait for the turn with deuces. He obviously doesn't have aces, and almost obviously doesn't have tens. So he's just he just has to have the queen jack of spades, or the king queen of spades if like an 8 of spades rolled off on the turn, or 9, or something where I have a decent amount of equity and I'm trying to play him off of an ace. And given this is sort of a stationy opponent, I think that I have a chance of getting mega, mega, mega paid if I, against like an ace rag, with taking the line of check call, then check raise all the cards 9 or below. Even if it's like a 3 of spades, he could, or a 7 of spades, he could like justify, or even the card that came, the 6 of hearts, like I could have, queen jack of hearts or something like that, and he might just really, really think that, what, he's representing a narrow value range, and he might have just picked up a flush draw, and I'm going to go ahead and call down if another heart doesn't roll off on the turn, or if, as long as like a king of hearts doesn't come off, or maybe even if it does, he still might call, but probably not. But still might. Probably wouldn't actually. If he had like ace king, then that would totally suck because he'd make two pair. But I think for the most part, like I can check raise the turn and then go ahead and jam any non-flush card lower than a 10 type of thing, and have a chance to get mega paid with this line, and also, you know, capture those like flop bets from him, and maybe like he turns a hand like queen, you know, he has queen jack of hearts and then turns a hand like, you know, what I'm talking about, and then he calls the check raise, and you know, and then I get a lot of money in the pot with the best hand that way. So a lot of different things can play out. I can get paid with, you know, a 7-8 of hearts that goes for a delayed c-bet or something like that. So I checked it once and then also checked it again, hoping he would do that, but ultimately he never bet, and I was sad. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up with just this one last hand here. And, you know, this video just, you know, it was one of those sessions, I think because there were so many regulars at the table, and some of the bad players were like not all that loose, and the dynamic, there just wasn't a whole great dynamic being created for action at the tables. But so I'm having to use a lot of hypothetical examples in this video. But here with the deuces here on the bottom left, so there's got to be some balance here, of course, but you know, this is on one hand a great board to check raise, because you know my opponent didn't bet very much, and I think that like for example, if I had like, you know, king jack off or something, like I think it would be a really good spot to check raise, because I can make it you know, 28, maybe 30, depending on stack size, maybe 32 based on some stack sizes. But anyway, I can make it 28, risk 28 to win 21, and since this is a board where my opponent's probably c-betting very close to 100% of the time, actually let me pause it real briefly and bring up poker or flop. All right, so if we were to give him like a 52% range, which I think is almost tight these days on the button. I mean, there are some people I'm pretty sure that are close to 100% raise first in percentage, but if we were to give him, let's give ourselves like a king jack off. As you can see, he has a hand that's like, gosh, I mean, 1.5% set, 1% two pair, 6% over pair. So we're looking at like, you know, like around 9% that's sort of like reasonably happy with getting check raised. And truthfully, you're looking at 2.5% really that is actually happy to be getting check raised here. You know, the over pairs and the top pairs, while the fold equity has certainly gone down year by year for those hands since I've been playing poker, you know, I mean, are you really stoked here to get check raise of nines, you know, and watch like a high card come on the turn pretty often and your opponent keep barreling and all that type of stuff? I mean, how excited are you really? Even if it's aces. I mean, at the same time, you're kind of bluff catching in a way. I mean, of course I might... Aces is a little different because I could have slow played kings through jacks or even tens pre-flop, and then be check raising for value, I think. Or I would think I'm check raising for value, but you'd have aces, and then I would be value telling myself probably the whole way with most board runouts. So ace is a little slight bit different, but I think you guys get my point. It's like 2.5% is like literally like, yes, I got check raised, and that's not a lot of hands. And so, if he's c-betting close to 100% of his range here, which I think a lot of people do, and I might even be one of those guys c-betting 100% of my range here, you know, he's just not going to be too thrilled about it. So, you know, and he has to fight back a lot in order for your check raise not to be profitable, because even if he's calling with every top pair or better, that's only around 20% of his hands. And even if he is calling with those hands, it's not that big of a deal, because as long as you're sitting there with a couple of decent overs, like 2 cards 10 or higher, you know, or a gut shot or something like that, gut shot with which you'd always have an overcard to his hands as well. You know, you're also going to get there quite a lot. So even if he is peeling with like 10-7 suited, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be profitable for him, because if you just, you know, especially if you have some kind of like 9-10 of diamonds or something like that that just picks up equity, or like an overcard to his pairs, which could be scary to him actually, because you check raising king queens and king jacks here and queen tens and stuff like that. So he's not going to be in a position where he can do much about it, because he's only got a hand 20% of the time that's top pair or better. So if you check raise and it only needs to work like 55% of the time, and he's only sitting there 20% of the time, he needs to have a huge fight back range to basically play it profitably. And even if some of his fight back range includes calling and just being a little more stubborn, then he also needs to make it to showdown, because there's really not a whole lot of reason for you to just stop barreling here, because you can just kind of, I don't know, just be like, hey, I'm going to keep betting and we'll see if you have something. And I think that's an okay mentality. I mean, I think that's like what Phil Ivey might think. I don't think he messes around with these flopzillas so much. He's probably just more like 7-3 deuce. Well, you don't have shit, and I'm going to make you play for your stack, and if you have it, then such is life. And I don't think that's such a bad strategy here, especially with some equity. But getting back to the hand itself, you know, if I check raise here, that's great for balancing that bullshit range a little bit, because, you know, when he does call down with pocket eights or something like that and sees my set, you know, maybe he gives a little more credit the next time. But I think you can actually be a little bit less balanced here and just kind of mess with them when you want to mess with them, and then just not really ever have anything when you do. And I think that'll still be plenty profitable, even if it's completely unbalanced and you literally never have a hand. And instead, what you decide to do when you do flop a hand like this is that you check call. Because you have a situation where your opponent's going to c-bet so frequently on the flop, maybe even 100% of his range, or certainly, I mean, it's got to be at least 80 or something like that, because a lot of hands do have like a reason to bet, like they have 2 overcards that can improve, or they have like 5-6 of clubs that can pick up lots of equity and hit a gut shot sometimes, and all that stuff. So it is probably pretty close to 100% c-betting range, in which case most people are also betting the turn just as their overall number. If you look in their poker tracker or Holdem manager, like 50-60%, but it might even go way up in this situation, because so much of the deck is just going to like look like something that they could use to scare you. So I like to check call here almost always, and then check raise the turn, which also is good in some ways, because I also have a pretty big, like, I'm going to call with Jack 10 of diamonds range, check call the flop with Jack 10 of diamonds, and check raise any 8, 9, maybe just check call a Jack and 10, and fire Queen, King, Ace on the turn once on the river after check raising the turn. No, what am I saying? I would be, let me rewind this just a little bit. I made several videos in a row, so I think I'm getting a little tired of hearing myself. But yeah, so on the turn, if I'm sitting here with like Jack 10 of diamonds, I'm going to check raise any card 8 or higher, and probably check call, except Jack or a 10, which I probably check call. So because um, I have a range like that in my check call flop check turn range, or check call flop check raise turn range. That was a weird one to say. I think it's also good to have like deuces, threes, and sevens here sometimes as well. So you know, I like to play hands that way where I check raise the turn here with, you know, like hands with overcards and backdoors on the flop, but also like sets and stuff like that, and balance that a little better. It's obviously, anytime you're making plays at people, it's always unbalanced, technically. I mean, people talk about striving for balance, but really the bottom line is you just have like draws you want to mess with people with far more than you have like sets. So the whole balance thing is like, it's almost like a phrase you use, like, or an attempt to balance that you make, but it's kind of bullshit in a way because there's like no one who's 50-50 check raising sets here and check raising like Jack 10 of diamonds or something. It's like way more likely it's going to be Jack 10 of diamonds, or, you know, some type of 5-6 of diamonds, or Jack 10 of spades that, like I said, I would still check raise that too. It has a gutter and 2 overs, and I think my opponent's full of shit a lot, and so it's just never going to be totally balanced. But at least it's nice for people to think you're a little more balanced than you are, because they do call down and see a set sometimes, and they're like, oh shit. So anyway, as you can see here, I made a check raise to like 48, and I think that would get like one. Yeah, that'd pretty much be able to size it pretty well for a shove on the river if he would have called. So anyway, that's all. This video ran a little longer than I thought, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll have another series coming out pretty soon. You can expect table play videos from me for probably at least, I mean, we'll say indefinitely, but probably at least for the next 2 to 6 videos that I release. But I plan on releasing some content that is not table play, just probably more like analyzing some of my best hands and trying to keep it a little more concise this time, and messing around with Flopzilla, or maybe another program where I can develop some decision trees and stuff like that. So anyway, hope you guys are enjoying the video. I am happy to be back. I think this is only like my, I don't know, first 4 or 5, 6 videos back after taking a sabbatical for nearly a year. So hope you guys are enjoying it. And as I mentioned last video, please give feedback. I'm getting literally 0 feedback. And there's a variety of reasons that that's a bummer. One is that I don't know what types of videos you guys are like, and I don't know. I know sometimes I explain things in a way that's not completely being understood by people, and maybe a follow-up question would help. And then there's also the selfish reason, like, hey, I just made a video and 1,000 people watched it and not one person said a damn thing. And it'd be nice if they did. So anyway, lots of different ways you can be helpful, and especially the overall membership. If you can comment on what you like and don't like, it tends to spur on some more discussion and kind of get to the bottom of what people really want to see. Right now I'm just stabbing in the dark, but I have no choice because nobody's responding to my videos. So anyway, hope to see you guys a little bit more in the forums, and hope you crush it at the tables.